Hi, I'm Delgado. I'm a criminal defense attorney in Central Florida. Today I want to talk about people on the autism spectrum and the challenges that can create when dealing with law enforcement. Law enforcement officers are increasingly being trained in how to deal with citizens who are on the autism spectrum. The reality is that many people on the spectrum are going to have a difficult time complying with law enforcement in the typical ways that police officers may expect. Not only is the average citizen going to be terrified or at least overwhelmed when encountering the authority of a police officer, but individuals with developmental disabilities may find it even more challenging. Further, some of the things that law enforcement officers are trained to detect as signs of suspicious activity may be very common in people with developmental disabilities like autism. For example, repetitive behaviors, what might be called tics, difficulty making eye contact, all of those things might make a police officer suspect the individual is up to no good when there's a perfectly good, reasonable explanation for it. Law enforcement officers are getting increased training in dealing with individuals on the autism spectrum and other developmental disabilities. Here in Volusia County, there's a local program, and I'll put the link below, where if you have a child with autism, you can register with the law enforcement agencies in that city or in the unincorporated parts of the county. Law enforcement will have a note put in the file, so any first responder coming into contact with someone at that residence will know that a person on the autism spectrum resides there. Additionally, there may be notes put in the system to avoid bright lights, to avoid loud noises, or otherwise try to accommodate the person at that residence as much as possible. Now, of course, if there's a crime or threat of violence or a dangerous situation, law enforcement officers are going to have to take appropriate steps. But knowing that someone on the spectrum resides there, they can come in with a certain mind frame and hopefully de-escalate the situation and come in with a way to solve the problem instead of making it worse. As a parent of someone with autism, it's important for you to understand that law enforcement officers are still constrained by Florida law. And Florida law prohibits the use of certain legal remedies for individuals with developmental disabilities, of which autism is considered one. Chapter 394 defines developmental disabilities in Florida law, and under that definition, autism would meet the criteria for a developmental disability. Law enforcement officers cannot use procedures like the Baker Act for someone with a developmental disability. So what happens many times is parents are overwhelmed by the situation. They have a child that's getting out of control, or perhaps being defiant, or just expressing themselves in a difficult way, a challenging way. Either they or neighbors call law enforcement. And what happens then is that law enforcement officers are constrained in how they can handle the situation. If your child is acting out or you're having difficulty controlling them, law enforcement is going to have very limited tools, and it may end in an arrest, which is the last thing you want for your child. If you're interested in finding out more about Volusia County's programs, I'm going to put the information in the links below, including where you can register. As always, if you or a loved one needs our legal help, we'd be honored to help represent you. And for over 20 years, we've worked hand in hand with families just like yours, getting through some of the most challenging situations you can imagine. It'd be our pleasure to help you. Please give us a call.